So this is part 2 of the Worlds Collide box set. Honestly, I originally planned for this to be part 1. Wrote this whole script you are about to watch first and everything. But then I got to the end and realized it felt more like the final part than the first. So I just cut the opening from that and made the one about the Bumblebee and Fangry. Before we get into the subject of this video, update! I've gotten the head off the Worlds Collide Bumblebee, but unfortunately, I don't think I can get the one off the Space Bumblebee. Pretty sure that one only fits because the ball joint is sandwiched between the two halves of the face during final assembly, and getting the two parts in half has proven to be a real nightmare. I think you'd need to get in there with an X-Acto knife, but I don't want to try that because I know I'd slash my hand open if I did. And I don't want to risk snapping the head off this hard-to-get collector's item, or doing damage to the sides of it getting it apart with some kind of blade, only to find that the ball joints are different sizes, and therefore the new head won't fit the body. If someone braver than me wants to give it a go with this rare thing, good luck to you, and if you succeed, send me pictures and instructions. For now, we must be content with the knowledge of what that would most likely look like, and it works way better if I do say so myself. Though the plastics aren't the same color, they are close enough that it's hard to notice the slightly less saturated new head is different. Anyways, so now we talk about Nemesis Primal and the original toy design Blackarachnia like I initially planned. Okay, first up, before I ever get into the looks of these figures, what the hell? How are all these figures so much worse feeling than the original versions? I never considered for a moment that they could use the same molds and somehow do so much a worse job with them. These two don't feel as bad as the first two, but they still feel like they got their plastics by rummaging through whatever bin dollar store knockoffs get their trash from, and the joint tolerances feel like they all came out of the quality checker's rejected parts pile. These literally feel like if I drop them, they will shatter like glass, and the tolerances have been ruined. The joints are all either too loose or too tight. Sometimes the new inverted tolerances are a good thing, but on every figure, it's more of a problem than a benefit. The shoulders on the Nemesis Primal are a prime example, pun semi-intended, which now have so much grip you will move just about every joint except for them when you try to actuate the shoulders. But let's stop meandering about and just talk about these dumpster fires. Blackarachnia here has been given the colors of her original toy along with its head. It's a pretty garish scheme, but it does actually trip my nostalgia pretty good, though I do feel like the colors are perhaps a little off. It just seems like nothing is quite saturated enough, except for maybe the purples. She has this strange dry brushing of a bluish silver all over her black parts, save for her crotch with the Predacon badge, and it does have an interesting look to it with its own appeal, but I feel like this was an odd choice, and I'm not sure what possessed them to do this. It's not really emulating anything from the original figure this way. I find it off-putting, but I also really kinda like it. Her bra bugs me though. The original figure had this texture on the chest that's a holdover from the Tarantulas figure it was a flat repaint of. This seems to be them trying to replicate that look by painting it instead of applying the texture, but the end result is that it looks like she's wearing a leopard print top. That coupled with the abominable desaturated colors makes her look like an 80s New Jersey housewife. It also really accentuates the size of her boobs, making her look even more top-heavy than she already did. Honestly, I'm really not a fan of the leopard print, but everything else about this I pretty much love. Though, I do think they could have gone with the non-avocado green. The head sculpt on this is the one off the original figure, and I do like this, but it comes across both under-detailed and over-painted, as I'm pretty sure the head was cast in black, then coated in purple. It's a bit sloppy, but not as badly done as the Kingdom version. I would have liked to have seen more details picked out, but the faceplate is cool, and the dark lining effect around the eyes works really well. It's a good head sculpt, but I want more from it. Now, if there is one figure to buy this whole set for based solely on its deco, it's the Nemesis Primal. You know me, I'm not one who normally cares much for paint, but oh god damn it's pretty. This is the first time in a long time that I've been all about the deco, and man, this thing is selling itself so much better than the base mold on looks alone. Every color on this thing punches so hard. The purple is regal, the black obsidian, the silver is lustrous, and the teal, oof, the teal punches me right in the joy centers of my brain. This is one of the most pleasing palettes of all time. It is pure joy to behold, and even the cannons on the insides of his arms are painted, and this is one of the places where the weaker tolerances actually helps this figure in particular. Getting the cannons out in the base mold is a pain in the ass, but here, these just slide out really easily and cleanly. Actually, it's only easier on the one arm. On the other, it might be harder than ever. The pitch black of the body really helps to mask how silly huge the hands are, making them much less frustrating to look at. And it also helps hide the giant hole in his chest that bothers me so much on the other figure. With everything already being dark as the night sky, you really can't see his void. Also, I have to applaud them for really coming up with something interesting and different to do with the crotch. It's kind of rare that the plastic's base color is so deeply ingrained as part of the design. The head on this sucker is also better than ever. It's amazing how much they've managed to differentiate it from the original sculpt while having them still be so close. The obvious change is the mouth plate is closed, which, why is that not the change that the Netflix version had? But they made the eyes way meaner. Narrowed and angry, they look like they are trying to set you on fire with a glower. It's also got these slits beneath them, but I don't know that those were necessary. We get the message. He's evil. It's already apparent. I think they also may have made the mouth plate right a little higher on his face, though I'm not sure about that one. But this head isn't a categorical improvement in every way. There is a lot of color missing here. His ear antenna, didn't get anything, and it feels really lazy. To be fair, the rest of the deco is good enough to make me want to forgive it, but it still feels unfinished and disappointing. So, on looks, these two are aiming for two very different goals. Blackarachnia wants to be a recreation of an old, completely wrong design, while Nemesis Prime wants to invent a semi-new character. Like, is this supposed to be Nemesis Prime himself, or a new guy who could potentially exist at the same time as the other one? Either way, I'd say that they are both successful at what they are trying to do, but one is definitely more successful than the other. And it's also not the niche item the other is. Like, I can see anyone wanting Nemesis Primal for being what he is, but there is a specific breed of collector who is particularly interested in the Blackarachnia. As for accessories, Blackarachnia comes with her gun, and this thing is nuts. For some reason, they cast it in gold, painted the whole thing purple, then gave it a coat of black on top of that for the blade section, and then painted silver on top of that for the tip. I mean, I applaud the effort, but the needless expense does confuse me. As for Primal, his two swords probably have more paint but less effort put in. They look good, but they don't inspire. So, the accessories these come with are pretty decent, but they don't come with a ton. I'm not going to go too much into articulation. I've already done videos on these where I covered what these can do in depth. Just know that everything these can do is typically much shittier because the tolerances are worse here. So, I'll only bother with the stuff I think is in any way significant. I do have to say, the Nemesis feels a lot less rubbery than the base Primal, and that is at least a semi-positive quality of the garbage this thing is made of. Another positive quality about this thing being looser in near every joint except for the shoulders is that the knees on this one are loose enough that you can bend them without separating the joint, unlike on the normal version. Also, his boot cuts basically don't even work as barely much as on the original figure. Honestly, of all the figures in this box, this guy probably has the best tolerances. While most of the stuff on him is too loose, it's only barely too loose, and it's not loose to the point where he can't hold a pose. He's got some stuff that's definitely too far in the other direction, and it feels like this could easily end up breaking, but at least in general, it does function. Blackarachnia, on the other hand, is a different story. The only thing keeping her up with joints this loose is the fact that the figure doesn't weigh anything to begin with. All the joints on this thing are bad, but the neck is exceptionally horrid, with the base joint being so floppy that even though the head weighs nothing, it can only barely support it, and you can just whip her noggin around, giving her a traumatic case of whiplash. Also, the rotation on this one may be one of the worst things I've ever felt. There are like these weird notches where it wants to rest, almost like it's been ratcheted, but in completely non-logical positions, and I don't know how to convey this, but it feels gummy and constantly like I'm on the verge of twisting her head right off. If I'm not careful, I just know I will break this and have her head rolling on the floor. You can just feel it. So, the posing on here is a hefty downgrade to the point where I don't even want to handle this for fear of breaking it. Transformation on these two is exactly the same. The Primal's is as boringly simple as always. Man to monkey, not hard. Blackarachnia's is kind of improved by the looser tolerances. Yes, this stuff all feels like it could snap easier, but since the joints aren't clinging together for dear life, the force you are putting into them is probably like a third as much as before. So it's like half the durability, but taking like a third the strain. The only problem with it is that on mine, the stage right thigh rotation was fused together, and I had to get out 2 pairs of pliers to twist them and break them loose. If I didn't do that, I guarantee you the leg would have snapped off before I ever rotated it. So the spider mode really isn't all that different here. It's got a blue hue and orange legs, but outside that, it looks basically the same. I will say that I am tempted to steal her spider legs and give them to the base version of the figure, as these are what color they are supposed to be, but I do find the black to be a nice color breakup on the original figure. As for the Primal, and I've got nothing to say. This paint scheme rules. This is such an evil-looking monkey. It's like a video game boss. It's awesome. He's still got the ugly monkey butt, but you look into that face with the blood-red eyes and tell me this isn't a great Halloween gorilla. So, of all these figures, I'd say that Nemesis Primal is the one good reason to get this box set. It has its problems, but for the most part, this is an upgrade over the base mold. The tolerances, while worse, are also kind of better since it does generally make the figure less frustrating to pose, and everything about the paint job is absolutely top tier. Truly, a spectacular color scheme. As for Blackarachnia, this will appeal to people who had the original figure as a kid, but the tolerances will make it a disappointment, and you won't want to handle it for fear of breaking the damn thing. In the end, I can't really say this box set is worth it. It's so much money to waste on a bunch of figures who are mostly terribly built bad versions of existing figures. It's living and dying on producing unique and interesting versions of these characters, and the result is an incredibly lazy Bumblebee that only seems to be here because they either couldn't think of something else to include, or because this was going to be a Bumble Jumper, and then some idiot executive shoved their head in and forced them to change it because Bumblebee sells better, or just because it has his name on the box. A terrible Fangry suffering from horrific mold degradation and very little effort put into any other aspect of it, a badly built but at least interesting to old Beast Wars collectors Blackarachnia, and a new invention of a character who's not really very original at all, but at least his deco is fantastic and his tolerances are tolerable, but in some cases are actually in some ways probably better than the original. Looking at you, knees. Though the shoulders are awful, 1 step forward, 1 step back. Look, I recommend you avoid this. It's just not worth it. It might have been, but the quality sucks. If you don't heed my advice, there's good to be found here. Just good that is at risk of breaking into 1,000 pieces with, like, no warning. So caveat emptor, buyer beware, there is some enjoyment to be had here, but you should probably just leave this on a shelf if you see it. And that's not half of what I have to say, but it's enough of what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please, share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.